Welcome to Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet. Join Janet and her friends as they gather at the intersection of consciousness and self-experience, what being consciousness in human form is all about. Access heart-centered awareness with them and feel the difference in the moment that will last a lifetime.
Hello, and welcome to Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet. I'm your host, Janet Barrett. Thank you for joining me here at the intersections of consciousness and self in the myriad of ways we encompass being. It is a delight to share with you the experience and wisdoms of my friends who join me here. Today's episode is all about consciousness and the awakening of friendship with Carol Olivia Adams. Consciousness includes oneness as our shared experience of being. We are relation-based creatures living with others. Carol Olivia Adams, author of The Awakening of Friendship, will join me and we will explore 9 principles in friendship that foster connection to another and embrace the universal tapestry of mankind. To start us off, we need to be our own best friend and just settle in and breathe easily and feel your heartbeat. Relax. Let your mind direct you to this place and then let it step away. We ease into our core. Your invested emotions or logic mindsets have no meaning here. Take yourself inward or just become aware of how your core as consciousness is present. Let your stories loosen. Let potential, possibilities, and the malleable qualities of time and space become so. We are altering and shifting in our realities that get us from here to there. We gain in sensing qualities not so seemingly conscious. We hear our intuitive sense of being. We feel our intuitive sense of placement. We become fluid, our shared genetic memories with other humans, free to connect with other living creatures and as others, as light. With our distinctions falling away, we experience all as vibrations and resonances falling into patterns of being present, free of boundaries and the limitations of mind. The sacred once again becomes present in the stillness of mind. Let it rest, our active mind. Become aware of peace. Our language is once again simple. It is of the heart in its tones, both as emotional terrain and as your core in being alive. Friend means a person with one who knows and who has a bond of mutual affection, typically exclusive of sexual or family relations. So not always our social media Facebook friends, but those we share a resonation with on a deeper level, no matter the length of time we've known each other. A friend connected me with Carol. My friend felt we shared many sensibilities about life and in being spiritual creatures in human form. I am grateful to her for this suggestion, as I am enriched by our resulting exchange, and you will be too. She encompasses powerful jolts of awareness in her humble demeanor and lightly felt presence for all of us. In the span of her radio career, Carol Olivia Adams has interviewed over 250 guests in many genres, such as spirituality, lifestyle, self-help, medical, and many more. She has hosted her show Intuitive Carol and Healers on internet radio. Her present show, The Matter of the Heart, aired on AM radio, and now The Matter of the Heart is seen on Binge Network TV. Carol always seeks to elevate the spirit of the listener-viewer with wisdom as its fuel. Alongside her radio endeavors, she is also an artist and an intuitive counselor healer, and her loyal clients connect to Carol with Carol's use of astrology, the symbols of the tarot, channeling, aura visualization, and automatic writing. We do have a lot in common. She is the author of the widely acclaimed book, The Awakening of Friendship. It is available on Amazon. I am sure you will want to get your copy and let it become sort of your Bible of how to be with others, but most of all, about how to be your own best friend. And then, do yourself a favor and buy one for a friend to share. Hey, I would start a group to explore and use her 9 principles as focus. If we approach life with being open to friendship, we will enjoy life more. It is my pleasure to share our conversation with you. Welcome, Carol. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Miss Janet. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, it's been a delight. So we're going to talk about consciousness and the awakening of friendship. You wrote this wonderful book that I've had a chance to look at, and you describe how there are 9 principles of friendship that create connection to one another and embrace the universal tapestry of mankind, I think is what the copy was saying. And I know this all comes out of your personal experience. Can you just describe that just a little bit and how this all came about for you?
Well, in my growing up years, my parents died when I was young, so there was no blood ties around. So I had to create my own framework. And I think in life, anything that happens to you that is somewhat of a struggling situation, whatever it is, you create your own framework. So I created my own framework of a family of friends. And I became very, very aware of certainly love or compassion or listening, certain principles that I have included in the book, The Awakening of Friendship. They just became very apparent to me as far as the framework of a family of friends.
Got it. Now, what I was struck by was also how we have to be our own best friends, right? And so often I have found with clients, and certainly with myself, is, we run our pro and cons list on how we're doing, and that critical voice can pop into place, and how we can be adversarial with ourselves. And so I was reading your information, and very much struck with, well, all of these are what you want to be with oneself. And so I think as we explore this with our audience, everyone, and as you feel this wonderful state that Carol brings to us, because you can feel how it's her heart. This is at her core. And as we join her, and we're gifted to have her with us to add to this resonance of the show here, how are you your own best friend? And we'll put that underneath everything. So what we come up with and what we wind up exploring, her and I, will always be in part of that context. So should we start with what these 9 principles are, and then just see where we go with them?
Sure, why not, Miss Jan? Yep.
Okay, all right.
There's 9 principles.
Okay.
And not in any particular order, but certainly principles that I felt were just important. And I call them more human principles. Principles of that we're maybe even born with, I don't know exactly, but just I call them more human principles.
Okay.
And the first one is the wisdom of patience.
Ah, right.
And a great quote in the book of wisdom, well, there's a few of them. One of them is Chinese proverb, and it says, with time and patience, the mulberry leaf becomes a silkworm. And Georgia O'Keeffe, the great artist, once said, nobody sees a flower. Really, it's so small, we haven't time. And to see takes time, like to have a friend takes time. So patience became, I think it's also a part of who I am as well. But I also, with my clients, I'll never forget certain clients that had a lot of patience and certain clients that did not have a lot of patience. and certain, of course, family or friends that did or didn't, I find it very interesting. I've always learned a lot from servicemen, men in combat, because they have created their own family of friends, and a strong family of friends.
Right.
So that some of them, when they come back, they want to, from the war, they want to go back again.
You're right.
They want to enlist again. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But in their combat, patience was a very, very big issue or a big principle. Learning how to navigate, the enemy. Learning how to be patient and not to necessarily proceed, aggressively, but kind of like testing out and feeling out their strategy, when to and when not to advance,
Okay. Well, so what comes to mind with that for me is about your sense of time. In consciousness work, we're always about being present in the moment, and that expands, and so time and space are malleable, and that there are those things that you can speed up, expand, and time is one of those things. The patience it takes, because sometimes things don't seem to respect what you think that they should be, right? Because you've got these two different viewpoints on it. And that there will be those things that can change in a moment, and then there's those things that don't. And how to straddle that, right, as part of a sense of wholeness and certainly patience. So everyone, notice your sense of patience with yourself when those things don't seem to change. So everybody just be paying attention. And what it'd be like to offer yourself the wisdom of patience. So just notice how that feels. There we go. And what's another principle there?
I just wanted to add a little bit with that, Janet. I always go back to nature.
Oh, right.
And I always say if you water a plant too much, it's not going to grow. That nature has its steps.
Yes.
As we do.
And
the more we acknowledge that there are divine steps in our life, then maybe we can be with that spiritual bond of patience.
Well, that brings to mind how some people really want to force things into a shape. Right. Or they'll force nature into, because there's the seasons and we respect the seasons, and then we take things out and we create artificial environments where the seasons get different. And I presume that that's about adaptation for a plant, to be able to switch its gears a bit, because they're all environmentally oriented. So check in and see, guys, how environmentally oriented you are in your nature. Being at peace with how you move in your circadian rhythm, how your daily, when you feel you do things and when you do not do things. And so patience, that's very good. All right. So what's our second principle there?
And the second one, Janet, is the presence of listening. And a quote by an unknown says, the most basic and powerful way to connect to another person is to listen. Perhaps the most important thing to give to each other is our attention. And that we can relate to certainly in friendship. That if we have a situation occurs in our life that is not pleasant or challenging, and we speak to a friend about it and they're not really listening, we can't help but question the relationship or the friendship. If a friend really listens and offers advice or just embraces it or gets involved with our words, then we know we have a deeper relationship with that person as a friend.
Got it. So you're describing active listening, where we're putting on hold our own story and we're truly being present for them and being there for someone, and what that feels like and what that whole state is about. Right. Excellent description of that. So just notice what it's like, everyone, to be an active listener. There you go, because we're running our stories so strongly that we don't hear when someone says something to us. We just kind of keep going, and then that takes you to a certain place where if you had stopped and reoriented, then wonder was probably there. So,
well, the other thing is, why doesn't the person listen?
Yeah, okay. Got it.
You know,
Tell me more.
Are they so? I mean, in other words, self-absorbed people in general, friends, that do not listen to another person because they're so much involved with themselves. So, there's all these psychological tricksters here. Again, somebody who is self-absorbed, that's going to be a hard time for that person to listen. And then if the person doesn't listen, then it lacks the understanding of the person, and we can go on and on. So there's also psychological stuff, when a person actually does not listen, why they don't listen.
Right. And when you're at different places with that, because you can hear how one's the dominant, one becomes the follower or the supporter, and we see these dynamics all the time in high school and, in groups and things. Someone becomes the dominant one, and they really are not listening to anybody's input other than what they want to hear from the input around them, right? And it can make a challenge. So everybody, in paying attention, are you listening to yourself? Who's talking in there? So what it'd be like with that voice that's in there in going to the authentic, intuitive, creative consciousness universe, whatever that essence voice is that consciousness is all about, and listening from there. There's no agenda. You're just open. There's no story. So that's kind of what you're talking about. Being able to listen is being able to drop the story and be present.
Right.
So, okay, there we go. So, all right, that's 2. What do we got? Another one.
And the third awakening is compassion. There's a great quote in the beginning of the chapter. It says, compassion brings us to a stop, and for a moment we rise above ourselves. So compassion, again, has no ego. It's not self-absorbed. It feels, and that's another book, how somebody can feel, the energy or the feelings of what the other person is going through, the sensitivity level.
I love how you call these the awakening, because that's really what life is about. It's about unfolding, awakening into these arenas, these, I really am enjoying that. So compassion, everyone, notice, this is what our podcast is all about: warmth, support, non-judgment, and compassion. Being able to be present for someone in a way that's not demeaning their power, right? Because that's, I think, one thing, about listening. What if you're hearing things you don't like, Carol? You know what I mean?
Right.
So, for compassion, everyone, just notice what it would be like to not judge another and to just appreciate them. And how precious it is for someone to share themselves with you.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, I think it's so much, I think it just should be so much emphasized in this day and age. Because also I was thinking, as you were speaking, Janet, that compassion also has an element of kindness to it. Kindness is a healing agent. And again, when somebody is compassionate to me, to you, or to anybody who's listening, you know that if you have a compassionate friend, that they are there for you. And compassion also, I would think, also connects to understanding and respecting you.
Right.
Because if they have compassion, they're understanding your situation, And sometimes when you understand a situation, then you can respect that situation.
Which doesn't necessarily mean they believe what you're saying in the sense of yes, that's the truth. They're there appreciating that you have that perspective, and it's also just a little different. They're not a yes man. They're offering, okay, I have tolerance and I have appreciation, and I empathize. I know what this is, and those different levels of sympathy and empathy and compassion. You're empowering people to have their experience without the judgment on it, I think, is what compassion is.
Yes, right.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's a wonderful, wonderful principle,
Totally. So we've got another one, Fourth Awakening. Give us what that one
Well,
might be.
I'm going to give you two quotes,
Okay.
Janet and listeners.
All right.
One of them is, no one can build his security upon the nobleness of another person. Definitely think about that one, because a lot of times, right, we sense we might have a friend, a relative, whoever it is, and we tell them something, and now because we tell them our experience that we're not comfortable with, then we feel all of a sudden secure because maybe we had looked up to them and that they would have the right response. But in essence, it's all about inner security, which connects to this quote by Seneca. He was a Roman philosopher. And he said, no tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many a wind assails it. For by its very tossing, it tightens its grip and plants its roots more securely. The fragile trees are those that have grown in a sunny valley. So the concept of security and security, inner peace, are very powerful, self-empowerment.
Right. And that wind blowing is all those things that can come at one, right? And it just reaffirms, it's just reaffirming, reaching down to where connection is. So inner security and inner peace, I think, are really the deep-rooted, all right. That's a lovely place to go. So for those of us that deal with meditation and mindfulness and breathing, there you go. Feel how deep you can go in your inner security of being. And that the tree, like the tree that feels the wind and moves, and you'll notice trees have a sense of their own solidness, but they move. And and depending upon the kind of tree, whether it's going to, be uprooted, that's what's interesting when you see these trees that are uprooted, because that has broken that groundedness center. So, all right. Those are lovely quotes.
Good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one, because we never think of inner security,
Yeah.
We think of more outer security. Like people, how many homes, or I don't know, possessions, or whatever it is. Things that are other than who that person is.
Right.
And that inner security will certainly empower us for situations in life that aren't so great or comfortable. And it's going to lessen our fears, because we know that we're secure with ourselves, and because we're secure with ourselves, and we can't be 100%, somewhat secure with ourselves, we know that we can tackle something that might not be the most comfortable, but we'll still try. And the key word is try.
Well, okay. And I think what I'm aware of is that in attaching oneself to another and your security coming from them leaves you susceptible to stuff. When it comes from within yourself, you have that inner security, then your environment can change, your connections can change, and you're not putting any neediness into a relationship. And I think that is really important when we are associating with other people in connection. And you can certainly see it in marriages and different things. When people are at different places, they have different agendas. And one that gets really a lot of copy about is neediness, right? And it puts people into certain role playing that is very hard on being, right? And so being able to be self-sufficient but shared. This is a shared experience. It doesn't come from me needing someone. It comes from me being with someone, right? It has a different feeling for that. So,
right.
Yeah.
And when there's insecurity in a relationship or in a partnership, because I think they're different, relationships and partnerships. But when there is insecurity, then there's no manipulation.
Key word here. Yes, there's no manipulation. Yes, that's
insecure
the word.
People,
right.
I've noticed, tend to be very manipulative.
Totally. And we are all manipulative. I mean, that's the whole thing about being able to create what we want in our life. But we're talking about the kind that's usury involved. Right. Yeah. Oh, good awareness there. So what about our fifth one? What about courage? Tell me about courage.
Yeah, the honesty of courage. I'm going to give the listeners two quotes.
Okay.
The first one is by Albert Einstein, and he said, any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. And another quote by Tagore.
Intelligent fool. Now, just a minute. Hold on. I love that. An intelligent fool. Usually not two words we associate together, but intelligent fool.
It's a good one.
That's a very good one. Okay. And is the awareness to be counterintuitive. It sounds like what he's describing there.
And the opposite direction, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's how we have Albert Einstein, or people that have created the inventors. That have gone a lot of them in the opposite direction.
Right.
Because they weren't even looking at it really any direction. They were looking at their own direction.
Yes. Do you think that's coming from an outside? Well, do you think that's coming more from an outside awareness, viewing? I mean, so here people are doing what they do, right? And they don't really always have an awareness of the world around them, especially if we're talking about scientists or intelligent fools. Right. Whatever. So that's kind of like a judgment call. I don't know that they call themselves courageous, but that's what you see. We all feel, okay, there's someone standing in their beingness, not necessarily their beliefs to me, because I think it's deeper than that. They are in their truth, and come hell or high water, there's my truth. And we can see it in terms of physical courage, first responders and people that take actions and stuff. And it's always fear is present, but you're still willing to go forward, right? You don't allow it to stop you in something. So we have different ways of exhibiting this. So everyone, notice your courage.
Very important.
With yourself. Yeah.
Right, because if we in other words, relating to what Tagore once said, you can't cross the sea merely by standing and staring at the water. So what does it take to have courage? Sometimes it's not easy, but the more you do something that you have a fear for, then it doesn't become the courage. You have the courage. The fear doesn't dominate it, because fear takes over the courage and also insecurity. And basically, courage is really being who you are when you really think of it. If you want something done, or if you want to speak out to a friend that you might not be like what they say to you, well, sometimes we don't want to say something to somebody because we might feel that maybe they'll reject whatever it is,
Right. They're going to take some discourse with it, right?
Right. So if we're more honest with ourselves, relationship with ourselves, honesty with our friend, then courage is just really being honest. There's no I'm not seeing any. What would I say? I don't know what the word is. prickling energy with it. It's just flowing. It's just flowing. Maybe that's not even the word, courage. It's just being with yourself at that moment, speaking your truth to have whatever or whoever, or speaking your truth if you want to create something. It's being who you are.
Okay, so notice that. What I can hear, Carol, is how we have to not be cautious, but we have to be in the moment, aware of all the forces around us, right? And that's what can happen in those moments of courage, is that sometimes it's safe to speak up, and sometimes it's safer to think something and not, and then there's all these other degrees that come into play, right? So the courage of standing up for your principles against someone who's much bigger than you and is going to beat you up works in context, right? And so in life-death situations, it works in context. So what we're talking about, I think, is how we know what our truth is, when you can move on it, and when you know to hold back. The courage is still there. It's just how you demonstrate it. Right? I think this gets kind of conditionalized sometimes in people. And if you're in a state that you feel courageous because there's fear present, right? Because it can work that way also. I can be courageous because nothing's going to happen. We have all these incredible setups that we do as humans in our story. It's really about being present, and if you're not in a place of fear, if you're in a neutral place, and so you have nothing to push against that way, you have just, okay, what do I gain in being truthful with someone? All you can do is gain your own self-worth, I think.
Right.
If you're not coming from an agenda place of trying to make someone feel small by stating your opinion, that's different than what you're talking about, I think. And
yes, right.
We just want to be clear on that. Okay. So that's 5. How you doing, everyone? We're getting a good workout here. How are we courageous? So how is one courageous with oneself, do you think, Carol? How would that
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How would we be courageous with ourselves?
How would we be courageous with ourselves? Certainly by speaking our truth, but also knowing that what could happen. I mean, are we going to get hung on 42nd Street at New Year's Eve? I mean, what is the worst that could happen? So, and if we're not, and we want to be, well, that energy gets repressed in us. And it can go into maybe the liver or the kidneys, whatever, It gets stuck.
It gets stuck.
So one of the concepts of life, of course, is one constant thing of life is that life is always change. So it may be going along with courage, courage with oneself is just, what is the worst? I would look at it more, what is the worst that could happen? And if you want to confront somebody and they don't like it, and you do it in a diplomatic, unhurtful way, and they're not comfortable, they don't like it, then that's fine. You can walk away, decide what you want to do. I mean, it's not so much the outer, it's more how you approach it within yourself, and recognizing that, again, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Well, I think what we're talking about is self-worth then. How much do you give up of your own worth in not speaking your truth? Or at what cost do you hold back? What gets empowered? If it's your fear that's running, if it's your fear of abandonment or violence or wherever, whatever, it's probably more fear generating. And that so often is fear of itself. It's fear of fear. And it's like, okay, it's not even the issue anymore. The story is not there. It's the fear that you're in relation to, so how to bring that down. And so being courageous with oneself. What do you got to lose? I love that. What do you got to lose?
When you think of it, right?
Right, definitely. So, what's the sixth awakening then? Something about faith.
The sixth is the power of faith.
Okay.
And I loved Martin Luther King when he said, faith is taking the first step, even when you cannot see the whole staircase. And that can kind of even relate to courage, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Courage is taking the first step, even when you cannot see the whole staircase. But Martin Luther King Jr. used the word faith. Mm-hmm. And a Navajo song says, walk on a rainbow trail, walk on a trail of song. And all about you will be beauty. There's a way out of every dark mist over a rainbow trail. So it's kind of like always feeling or believing, really believing that there is something brighter out there, even though we get stuck with something that's not pleasant for us in the moment, as well as believing, if you wanted to go into that real spiritual, divine source way, that there is some type of orchestration being, directed or produced or whatever the word is by an infinite force that maybe is actually supplying us with the major events of our life, and just being aware of the synchronicity of it.
Right. Now, with consciousness technologies and consciousness references, the faith and believing speak to the human part of ourselves, where consciousness is that spiritual, that essence side of us, and how in realizing if you don't have attachment, if you don't have agenda, which is the humans do that, that part of ourselves that's doing that. Since we're both, a consciousness is within ourselves. It's realizing how we navigate these two places, right? And so for me, it's about being. So I don't have to believe, right? That part of myself knows if it's not in attachment with outcomes, which is what the human is always in relation to, that I can pull from that place, and that empowers faith, and it empowers beliefs, and it empowers things. It's coming from that. I'm not looking to believe in something to make this real. I'm looking to be it, and then that's where it shows up as, So good, yeah. You have to have. I think that's about connection, certainly. Right.
And the present moment.
Yeah, and that's trust. There's definitely trust elements to that.
Yeah, definitely trust and belief is very strong. And just noticing how life works. I mean, I always go back to nature. I mean, nature has its own style,
I love how you call it that. Okay, tell me about the style of nature. Yeah.
Well, if I plant a seed of corn, well, I don't think you can plant a seed, whatever, in the ground, it's not going to become a daffodil,
Right.
I mean, nature has its own way of becoming. And if we can also look at that with faith, that plant will grow the way it's supposed to be, with the proper nutrients, just like the proper nutrients in friendship, the sun, the warmth, the soil, the earth, reality, the air, that communication, just to have that total, faith is a very powerful word. It's certainly used when people also face illnesses, that the doctor might say, plan your will, in 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
that person isn't going to listen to anybody else, but their own self,
Mm-hmm.
because it's also related to their spirit. If you
Mm-hmm.
have strong faith, you'll have a strong spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's current connection. Definitely
Mhm.
connection. Definitely.
Mhm. Mhm.
So our seventh awakening, gift of generosity. What's
Mhm.
that about for us?
Well, it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Khalil Gibran,
Mm-hmm.
the author of The Prophet. And he
Uh-huh.
has a great quote. He says, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. And
Right.
it's also kind of like when people give, to charities.
Mm-hmm.
I thought of that as well. They'll give a check, but who knows? Maybe it's for a tax write-off, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Right.
But
Right.
but
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's also wise, or I don't know what the exact word is, to know about what you're giving to, or
Mm-hmm.
call up the charity and find out what's going on. I know St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital is wonderful. I mean, they tell you what's going on. They'll visit your home.
Mm.
Um, so it's a giving from your heart in a generous, I'd say, as much as you can give.
Mm-hmm.
As much as you can give. There's a quote here in the beginning by Confucius, and he says, "Give a bowl of rice to a man, and you will feed him for a day, and you will feed him for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Teach him how to grow his own rice, and you'll save his life."
Mm-hmm.
So the gift of generosity is just totally from the heart, totally from the heart without barriers. And it certainly, of course, involves compassion with it.
All right. That feels like there's elements of time and attention in it.
Mhm.
Right? That you be willing to be present with someone, whether it's a charity, for instance, or
Mhm.
it's someone who's dying, or
Mhm.
whoever it is. That gift of generosity is about. It's going to have so many elements in it. It's about giving and receiving, and why you're doing it. I think why comes
Mhm.
in.
Mhm.
And so, as in with oneself and with others, that would be kind of like self-care to me. The gift of
Mhm.
generosity is allowing yourself to know yourself,
Mhm.
and
Right.
to be supportive of others, and not requiring something back. And I think that's
Mhm.
where I hear in the gift, I
Right.
know for myself that as an expression of heart, one gives and receives at the same time. That it's just the dynamic, the naming of the direction it's going. But in always extending my hand, I'm receiving something back. And that's a state of my heart and how I organize around. And
Mhm.
when you've said that as a gift of generosity, there's no kind of attachment to that. There's
Mhm. Mhm.
so those that are doing something because it makes them feel better, it's just, well, I don't have to get so involved. I can just write a check. Or it can be, I have no time to give. Let me give
Mhm.
them something that's important to me, my money, right? And let me
Mhm.
do that. So it's in how you're framing this interaction, I think that's
Right.
important. Yeah,
Mhm. Right. Right.
that state you
That
hold it
makes
in.
sense. Sure.
Yeah. So we're almost to our eighth one. What is that? Gratitude?
Gratitude. and, and I have two quotes for that.
Okay.
And one is an old proverb, and it says, "Count your blessings
Okay.
instead of your crosses. Count your gains instead of your losses. Count your joys instead of your woes. Count your friends instead of your foes. Count your health instead of your wealth. Love your friend as much as yourself."
Hmm.
That's
That's a
it's all
full plate.
positive, right?
That's a full plate.
Right.
All right, everybody, notice that. No, that's great. So give it to me again. Let's go
Sure.
so we can just really capture, because that so includes so much in there. Okay, what do we got again? Give that to me again.
Count your blessings
All
instead
right,
of your crosses.
instead of your
Count your
cross.
gains instead of your losses.
Okay.
Count your joys instead of your woes. Count your friends instead of your foes. Count your health instead of your wealth. Love your friend as much as yourself.
So notice that, everyone. When you're in a place of complaint or concern or compromise, you can go to this list, and there will be something there for you to focus on. And I think that's so important, and in being appreciative. And no matter where you find oneself in one's life, there's always something to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great list. All right. Yeah.
And relating to friends, Robert Kennedy said we must find time to stop and thank the people who make a difference, and that certainly could be good friends or messengers, that come into our life.
I think also one thing, that comes to mind when we were thinking about friendship was that so often we call people friends who are just acquaintances. It's a word we don't always use well. We call people friends that there's really no context there.
Mm-hmm.
Either for some reason you hit it off, but there's really nothing goes past that. And I think people, what you're speaking of is all these different levels of engagement we have with others around us.
Mm-hmm.
And that those that are going to show up for you, and and then there's those that you have a work relationship with, and you have nothing else to talk about if you don't have that work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have those that have no idea about what you do, and so you don't share that part of yourself with them. You share this part of yourself with them. And it's very interesting, because I know that I can meet a total stranger and have some kind of event happen, and you're friends for life, because you had that moment where it came down to what life was about. And that will stick with you forever. And that's sort of, what you're talking about with the military and the friendships that happen. But this can be when it's just something happens. The bus goes over, the plane crashes, whatever it is, and something happens that unites you in your experience. It becomes that mutual experience. And you know that whatever you shared was what you shared, and it is your truth. And it will take you the rest of your life, even if you never see them again, right?
Right.
And one thing that's been nice with social media is people, and there's a show, Ann Curry, I think, about people that had an experience, and now 50 years later, they're looking to go back to that person again, right? And be able to share with them how it made a difference in their life and what came out of that. And I think that's really one nice thing about social media, to a certain degree, is it's creating and fostering to different degrees this what are we talking about? Friendship. That's right, just friendship.
Right.
So
makes sense. Right.
We can be grateful. It doesn't cost anything.
Well, we are grateful. It's a sweet. Let's see, where is that? Let us be grateful to the people who make us happy. They are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom.
Who said that?
Marcel Proust.
Oh, okay. He should know what he's talking about. Right. So what if everyone is a garden, right?
Right.
Yeah. And, people have an opinion on what's a weed and how it serves. And
Right.
And those poor plants are really, hey, I'm an opportunist. I show up, don't judge me for what I am.
Right, right.
And what if everyone's a garden? What if we're gardeners? Yeah,
right.
I love that. Totally. So tell me about the essence of love.
Right.
I think that's your ninth.
Well, the essence of love, I think a good analogy is by Khalil Gibran, again, the author of The Prophet. And it's pretty much a famous quote. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. And I think that is what the essence of love is, There's no manipulation. There's no control. There's no domination. It's coming totally from the heart, in a very kind way.
There's no condition on it. Yeah,
right?
There's no condition on it. See, we do this. We've created this conditional, non-conditional. No, love has no conditions.
Right.
So it's not love if it's a conditioned state. And this is what you try and get through to people. It's like there is only love.
Right.
And what happens when you take that oppositional nature on it or conditionalized nature off of it? And I think we use the word poorly so often. And that people describe something as love, and it's not. It's like you meet my conditions and then I'll grace you.
Right.
That's not love.
Right.
So everyone, be paying attention. Notice how you feel about you as love, you as lover, you as expresser, you as an essence of love. Where do you feel that in oneself? Right.
Right. Yeah, very important,
Yeah.
And are you comfortable with it?
Right.
Do you like to have love come back to you?
Whoa. Now we may have conditions about that, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe some people are comfortable with that.
Well, that's because we seem to have encoded love with attachment. If you take the attachment off it and you just express it, you don't have a condition on it, then you don't have a fear that it can be taken from you and that you can be abandoned. What you realize is that all we have is this moment, and we are so blessed to have this moment, and there's no guarantee about it being in the next moment.
Right.
And that's where people reach resistance because it feels so good, and we want to continue it. And then we have a sense of loss, and nobody wants to feel loss, right? So it's how we organize this information, but certainly this state. So how do people just express love?
Janet, it also has nothing. It has. Sometimes people use the word because they're insecure. There's a lot of insecurity, so they might tell somebody, I love you, but it's rooted. The root of that is their insecurity. They just want to feel that connection without necessarily knowing the essence of love.
And then they feel the attachment that comes with offering love, right? And then they have their resistance to that because they've got it invested with other things. It's just not I can just love you and say that. I can demonstrate it. Now, that's an interesting thing, to not be able to say words, but I can show you.
Right. Right. Definitely the action of it.
The action of it. So everyone, notice the action of your love. Notice your comfort with it, or your discomfort with it. And I think sometimes it's the elephant in the room. So in just noticing, take a visual here. Let heart-centered awareness, consciousness be present for you in here. And just notice how big is your elephant. If love is an elephant, just notice how you relate to it. And what it'd be like to just sit next to it. Don't do anything. Just let yourself be with it and see what happens. And extend love.
Right.
See what happens to the elephant. I think there's lots of different ways it's how we engage information. And these are old. I think they fall into the area of myth. Emotions do sometimes. They get such a story going on about them. And when you just look at things at its essence and you go, what is love?
Right.
How it's called do no harm to me. It's about putting someone else as important as oneself or not, or even more. I think there's, if you depend upon your self-respect and how your sense of self is, I hold others equal to me. So when I extend love to you, I'm extending myself, right? And that relationship there. So what do you notice about love? Is it something we see a lack of, do you think? And what you
I don't know. I use a tool, a testing tool with the action of it.
Okay, can you share it with us?
Yeah. Well, in other words, if I'm going through something uncomfortable and I mention it to somebody and they said, okay, I don't even know what a good example, I'll help you out somehow. I don't necessarily mean financial, but I'll help you out somehow. And if they follow through with their words, because a lot of people will use the word love you, without, I don't know what the heck they're talking about. In other words, they're just using it very randomly.
Yes, it doesn't have meaning to them. They're not paying attention.
There's no meaning at all.
Yeah, right.
So it's kind of like testing out the action of it, the action of the love, and it involves probably maybe elements of compassion as well, because I think compassion is one of the highest. I think compassion is the highest vibration of love.
Yeah.
For mankind. So it's more what they're going to do about it. I love you. When I was very young, I had a couple of blood relatives, like around, I don't know what, Christmas, whatever, I blocked it out. We'll do this. They didn't do anything, so I lost total respect for them. You can listen to the word, but then see how they follow through with the word.
Right.
Because everybody has a different definition of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's not a universal definition.
Yeah. Right.
It's different for every person.
I think it's more the conditionalized form. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easy to say when it's easy to say, and then it's not easy to say. So when it's not easy to say, it's coming from a place of sincerity.
Right.
Right? When you're just like, okay, I've got to put myself on the line here. And that leaves me open, and that brings its own set of circumstances, and it's you're left, you're describing so well how, sure, I love it. Sure, well, let's go with that. And you're just on to the next thing. It is like, no, I don't have time for it. Right? You just say this thing. And so everyone, pay attention. Notice how you word when you say, oh, I love it. Just really notice if that's real. Sometimes we're just compensating. We're just covering up. We don't want to get involved, so we can easily say something.
It's an easy word to say,
It's an easy word to say without meaning. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. Oh, well, this has been lovely, Carol.
Oh, I'm glad.
This has just been lovely.
Listeners got something out of it, Certainly the last word, love, I'm sure you'll all be aware of when people say they love you, what are they doing about it? What are they doing about it,
What does that mean?
It doesn't mean Valentine's Day, in other words, Somebody brings you a dozen roses.
Usually the other person
love you,
at first. And I think that's okay. From a place that I feel okay about myself when I do that. So I think we all do. So in this great experience that you've had of life so far, and I'm sure you've got many more years left to you, what is it about the awakening Where are we with that? Do you feel that it's something that's in a good place, or is it something that's in its beginning stages, or how do you notice the awakening of friendship in our society and things?
Well, unfortunately, I don't want to sound like a pessimist here, but
Okay.
I mean, as the more technology takes over, I was talking to a friend before. She purposely doesn't keep her phone on the whole time of the day. She'll check it twice a day and then turn it off. So with the advance, and it's going to become more and more the advancement of technology, I'm not convinced that the awakening of friendship or friendship is going to be valued as much. It's valued more with people, I think, maybe in their 50s or their 60s when they were brought up with it. But the younger generation, and I'm not knocking it, the phone is their friend. They would rather, and I hear this from a lot of people, text you or email you rather than call you on the phone.
Right.
So if you don't call on the phone, you're not capturing the heart of the person, because the voice, to me, comes from the heart.
It conveys so much. Right. Yes.
So it's going to me, I hate to say, it's going to become more and more alienating from the heart. And maybe there'll be a whole new concept of what a friend is. Maybe if the phone works well, I don't know. If you have a good plan with your phone, that's a good friend for you. I don't know. But it's certainly going to turn. The concept of it is definitely going to turn around.
Well, you bring up a good point, and we're still navigating all our technology and how it changes things, and whether it's issues of privacy or exposure, right? And I guess that's the opposite of privacy, is you see things being exposed that all of us have, and it can be taken out of context, and it can be someone's interpretation, because most of us are not paying attention. And so we don't have that context of what was going on dynamic, but it's easy to judge. And so you see a line, you see a Twitter, you see something show up, and you got that little soundbite length, and you try and register. For those of us like yourself and I who register energy in that, it's had so many people participate on it already. By the time I get it, that to know what generated it can get lost sometimes.
Right.
It's already morphed through all these other connections that are pulling on it, and I think it's harmful in the sense of it doesn't help you develop your own self awareness of how you operate in the world in some ways. And I can see the compromise that we get when, and it was even like you and I in talking about this. It was like, can we have a phone conversation? Because I just find email just as putting out stuff, and I don't get the feedback, right? And I don't have to consider all the questions that come if I just talk with you, right? And we get them dealt with there. And so it's an interesting way, and I don't text much, and if I do, I'm always writing letters, right? So,
That's nice.
I don't shortcut it. So it's this 2-minute sound bit kind of technology is not a bad way to go. It just, you have to appreciate that what is gained or lost, and what is gained and lost at the same time, I think is
right.
And trade-off. And the one thing I appreciated about history is that it gives me context. It has deep value that way. And if you're not challenging, if you're not curious, it means you just are complacent. You just accept whatever comes down
Right.
Twitter feed, and you go, Oh yeah, and you're basing it on nothing but what those little 144 characters are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I see. So, so just to notice, everyone, how you use technology, how it might be running interference or creating a different dynamic. If we put it in a context of something that's just showing up, it creates a different context. It's a different reference. And I don't think anything. When we do consciousness work, we know that time and space are malleable, and there's no time or space between you there and me here, kind of thing, and we can tap in on that level, and we're doing that all the time, and appreciating it, and that verbal skill set is there for a reason, and catch so much. So what would you like to share with people in your experience of all this? Where, in having written this book and the direction you felt to write this book, what brought that about for you?
Gee whiz, I don't know. I think major events in our life are going to happen, and it's probably my own intuition. I'm also an artist, as far as a painter, and it just, and I channel. So, the energy just came out of me. That's how it really started. It just came out.
You had to do it.
I think the most powerful principle for me that I can relate to the most in the book, and maybe that was a little bit of a stimuli, we'll call it, is compassion. Because that to me is very, very important for people to understand each other, to give to each other, respect each other, and to be loving energies for each other. And that might have been, one of the reasons that I wrote the book. It certainly isn't. And maybe also I was affected by some clients who didn't show compassion. That could be. But I know the root, for me, the most important principle is compassion.
Well, I think, what you've articulated in these 9 principles is if you're comfortable with them, then you have a really good understanding of oneness and connection. What it takes, it's easy to just be born into something, right? And that's the given. And then you learn that there are others, and you learn that in the womb when you turn over and that, placenta, that umbilical cord develops and you see mother in there. Otherwise, you're facing outward in the beginning. And so, it's all one thing. And then all of a sudden there is this awareness that there's something else there. And it's how you interact, how you develop, what takes place in order for good communication, good connection, because the given is that we are all connected, and the human is going to register the outside differences, right? And we're each individuals, and we are individuals sharing a collective experience called consciousness, is the way I usually refer to it. So we're each unique, but we're all part of the pie. We're each a slice. And so there are those common things in being. And when I say someone is not, that you are separate from me, then you lose that connection. And in how to gain it back, what you've described and articulated here is how to be in harmony. Right, we have no guarantee over the other guy's position, right? We don't, but they may be, and we co-create. So it's how we come together and create something. How, if you can have patience, listening, compassion, inner security, and peace, if you know what these things are, and they're real for you, courage, the power of faith, to be able to connect with something, the gift of generosity and gratitude, and then the essence of love. That all is the essence of love, kind of, sort of, don't you think?
Right. Mm-hmm.
That all those are elements that come out of that. That's how it kind of breaks down.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, that's like the umbrella, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, maybe that's the root of the tree, and then you have all the branches, you know?
Right. Okay, that's a great way to look at it, too.
Yeah, I could see that.
So. Yes, tree of love. We've got the tree of knowledge, right? Maybe the tree of knowledge is love.
Right.
It's what we...
I could definitely see that. Yes.
Yeah, right. And in all our different frameworks, it's how we reach connection and being able to listen and those things. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience while we've got this time?
Let's see, Janet and listeners. I'm just going to read a poem that I created in the beginning.
All right.
That could maybe close up the energy. It's called the Song of Friendship. The song of friendship is gracious, sings inside and out, and below and up high. The same air that lifts the eagle's wing is the breeze that lights the dove, is the wind that flies the song with the Creator up above. And down below our feet, the same air moves within the ground, where water, rock, and roots run deep. The air circles the song around. The heart that sings has heard the song. Shh, listen to the air. The song of friendship is gracious, is singing everywhere.
Lovely. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Now, where were you and when did you write that?
It's a good question. Where was I? I think I was in Arizona at that time. Yeah, I couldn't write in New York. It was impossible. No, too much energy, too much bouncing energy. So I needed a peacefulness. I always knew I was going to move out here, but I just needed that peacefulness. And so I did that a couple of years ago.
Well, that's another thing that comes to mind is how in a city, urban setting, we can be so crowded and we have so much information running around us, and we are all sensitive to the degree that we're sensitive about the bus full of people, the subway full of people, and everybody's got something going on, and how you have to be in a state of awareness or total focus, is the other way I guess you go, and how much you interact, and whether they're on their phone and you could say hi or something, whether they hear you or not. We're bombarded constantly with information and projection, and so often other people's stuff. So in the quiet, you can reevaluate. That's what the power of meditation. That's the power of being mindful, is where you are. So I guess the question comes down to how awake are any of us? And we may be very awake in some areas, but we may find that what you were noticing, all of us participating here, is that there are some areas that could use a little awakening. And so we're going to take this time. Thank Carol very much for sharing what this has been about for us as part of where we go from here. There's so much going on in the world around us. How do we navigate it? And we have to say that it's okay. We have to have, you can call it faith, or you can call it your spiritual non-attachment that says, oh, this is an experience, and where's this going to take me? And an appreciation of that, and find what it's like to be human.
Right.
What it's like to be spirit in a human design, and how I relate to the nature around me, and what do I focus on.
Right.
These are all what you described was so much. I don't want to say positive or negative, but they're just enriching, right? None of these 9 things are going to hurt anyone.
Right.
To be able to become adept at them. And there is so much emotional energy running in the world that feels less than. It makes you feel less than. It makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel less safe. You can phrase everything in those things. And in appreciating that, we just shift focus, because this is the physical realm of contrast, and how all that disharmony that we've been generating, because it's been us making our malleable reality together, how these become the contrast, and then how they become the norm. This is what you base who you are when you're coming from a heart-centered place, don't you think? That
Definitely.
This is what you offer. This is what we offer. Well, all right, everybody. Thank you, Carol.
Oh, don't mention it. My pleasure. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much. Really.
I think we've all enjoyed ourselves here.
Yeah, that's great.
Good. All right. So we'll say goodbye, but not farewell.
Okay,
you and I will continue to talk in a minute, but I want to thank everyone who joined us. And we've got, you can hear all the wonderful information Carol presented in her poem and in her quotes, and a lot of that will be listed in the roots and ageless sections that's coming up. So thank you, Carol, very much.
Oh, thank you, Janet, very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I hope the listeners, if you walk away with something, to elevate your spirit, that's fine with me.
That's what sharing does, right?
Right.
We'll all feel better if they feel better. I think that's the given.
Right.
What goes around comes around. All right. Thank you. Our root section is all about the influences and details and links we considered in our conversation. Carol accesses many different references in her expression of being as an artist and as fuel in her work as an intuitive counselor and radio host. Many were mentioned. I love her favorite motto about life. The human heart feels things the eyes cannot see and knows what the mind cannot understand. Robert Follett. I'm also going to include in print on the episode 15 website page another one of the quotes she mentioned. It is a great navigational tool about bringing into focus appreciation and gratitude, which are foundation to enjoying life. It doesn't have a title or known author that I could find, but here it is. Count your blessings instead of your crosses. Count your gains instead of your losses. Count your joys instead of your woes. Count your friends instead of your foes. Count your smiles instead of your tears. Count your courage instead of your fears. Count your full years instead of your lean. Count your kind deeds instead of your mean. Count your health instead of your wealth. Count on God instead of yourself. And the author is unknown. Our following quotes are courtesy of the Positivity blog at www.positivityblog.com. There's not a word yet for old friends who've just met. Jim Henson. I love that. That's so true. Friendship is the hardest thing in the world to explain. It's not something you learn in school. But if you haven't learned the meaning of friendship, you really haven't learned anything. Muhammad Ali. And this one I just love. If ever there is tomorrow when we are not together, there is something you must always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. But the most important thing is, even if we are apart, I will always be with you. Winnie the Pooh, courtesy of A.A. Milne. We will look forward to Interlude, an internet retreat, to be back with us on our next episode. Please feel free to enjoy the extensive meditation archive that you'll find there for Tom's wisdom about experiencing life. You can read my blog for this episode, 15, Consciousness and the Awakening Hearts of Friendship, at www.janetandbeyond.com. Carol Olivia Adams' book, The Awakening of Friendship, is available on Amazon.com, and you can reach her directly at intuitivecarol@gmail.com. Look for her show, Matter of the Heart, on Binge Network TV. All links mentioned during this episode are listed on my website page for episode 15 at janetandbeyond.com/podcast. Thank you for joining me here at Journeys to Enlightenment with Janet. A new episode is released every 2 weeks. Any questions or thoughts or guests you'd like to suggest, you can email me directly at janetandbeyondpodcast@outlook.com. For more information about all the elements that make up each episode, they are on my podcast page at my website, www.janetandbeyond.com. While there, you will also find information about my other podcast show, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and all about my work with clients. You can sign up to receive my regular weekly blog, Life in the Beyond, Journeys into Enlightenment. If you're looking for other regular opportunities to sit in heart-centered awareness with myself and others, you can join us in my Fuzzy Photons playground groups I offer on Wednesdays. Live interactive space via Zoom video conferencing. You can follow each episode of this podcast series on my YouTube channel, Journeys into Enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Till the next time, notice what feels different right in this moment. It is real, and it can last a lifetime.